The annual Hayes family gathering was, as always, a masterclass in subtle one-upmanship wrapped in the guise of familial affection. Aunt Deborah's sprawling mansion, a monument to old money and questionable taste, glittered under the late afternoon sun. Crystal chandeliers inside the cavernous living room cast a blinding glare on the designer dresses and ridiculously expensive watches that adorned my relatives. The air hung heavy with the cloying scent of several competing perfumes and that distinct aroma of inherited wealth that seemed to cling to the Hayes clan like an invisible, suffocating cloud. I stood near a towering ficus in the corner, observing the familiar ritual. My cousins Kevin and Michael were locked in their usual battle for attention, each anecdote about their latest business triumphs delivered with a carefully calibrated air of casual superiority. Kevin, ever the finance whiz, was regaling anyone within earshot with tales of his recent lucrative deals, while Michael, the marketing guru, boasted about his agency's latest viral campaign. My own simple navy blue dress, chosen with the deliberate intention of fading into the background, felt less like clothing and more like a shield against their inevitable judgment. "Amelia, darling, is that you hiding over there?" Aunt Deborah's voice, sharp and carrying as a well-aimed dart, sliced through the convivial chatter. I almost hadn't seen her approaching, her perfectly coiffed silver hair gleaming under the chandelier light. "Still dabbling in your freelance design, dear?" She offered a tight, practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I took a small sip of my lukewarm white wine, the corners of my mouth twitching almost imperceptibly. "Actually, I've been quite busy." "Oh." Her perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched ever so slightly. "Still with that little, what was it called again? Pixel Pro Designs?" "Something like that," I replied calmly, meeting her gaze. My cousin Kevin, overhearing the exchange as he paused his own monologue, couldn't resist adding his 2 cents. "Come on, Amelia, Uncle Richard was just saying the other day, we could always use someone with an eye for aesthetics at the plant. Maybe you could design our new company brochures?" He chuckled, a condescending sound that echoed through the room. I thought about the complex algorithms and lines of code that demanded my attention back at my real office, the one my family knew nothing about. "I appreciate the thought, Kevin, but I'm quite content with my current projects." "Content?" Aunt Deborah's laugh was a brittle sound. "Darling, you have so much potential. Your cousins are out there building empires, and you're designing logos." She gestured vaguely with a hand adorned with a diamond the size of a robin's egg. "Honestly, Amelia, sometimes I worry about you. If only they knew the empire I was actually building, brick by digital brick, right under their noses." The story of how Novatech Solutions began, how I transformed a late-night coding session into a multi-million-dollar tech company, started almost exactly 10 years ago in this very house. I was fresh out of college with a degree in computer science and a revolutionary idea for a software that could streamline business operations. I'd spent months perfecting my pitch, naively believing that my family's extensive business connections would be my launchpad. Instead, I was met with polite amusement and thinly veiled disdain. "Consulting? Amelia, dear, that's a man's world," Uncle Richard had boomed, his voice thick with the authority of someone who'd never had to work a day in his life. "Stick to something suitable. Maybe Aunt Deborah could use some help with her charity galas." That night, amidst the glittering chandeliers and the suffocating air of superiority, I made two silent vows. First, I would build my own success, entirely independent of their help or their condescending opinions. Second, I would make them regret every dismissive word, every patronizing pat on the head. Just then, my phone buzzed discreetly in my clutch. I glanced down to see a message from Chloe, my fiercely efficient assistant. "Urgent meeting request confirmed for tomorrow morning. Hayes Manufacturing representatives regarding potential acquisition of Global Innovations. Your approval needed." A small, almost imperceptible smile played on my lips. The pieces were falling into place. The annual Hayes family gathering was about to get a whole lot more interesting. The memory of that previous family gathering, almost a decade ago, still felt surprisingly vivid, like a poorly photoshopped image, stubbornly refusing to fade. I'd arrived brimming with nervous excitement, a freshly printed business plan tucked under my arm, ready to unveil my vision for a revolutionary business software to my family. The titans of industry, or so they like to believe. Instead of enthusiasm, I was met with a wall of polite but firm discouragement. Technology is a fickle thing, Amelia, Aunt Deborah had said, patting my hand dismissively. Stick to something tangible, Mom dear, like real estate. Now that's an investment. Uncle Richard had been even more direct. Software? Honestly, Amelia, it sounds like a hobby, not a career. Why don't you come work at the factory? We could always use another pair of hands in accounting. The implication, of course, was that my ideas were too frivolous, too female to be taken seriously. My cousins, then just fresh-faced graduates themselves, had offered equally unhelpful advice, ranging from suggesting I get a real job to vaguely mentioning the importance of networking without offering any concrete connections. That night, after enduring hours of thinly veiled pity and suggestions that I should focus on finding a nice young man, I sat alone in my childhood bedroom, the carefully crafted business plan lying unopened on my desk. The sting of their dismissal, their complete lack of faith in my abilities, was sharper than I cared to admit. It was then, in the quiet solitude of that room, that the two decisions solidified in my mind. I would build my company, my way, without their input or their supposed wisdom. And when I succeeded, they would know exactly how wrong they had been. Novatech Solutions began life in a cramped, unglamorous office above a bustling laundromat. The rent swallowed a significant chunk of my meager savings, leaving me with just enough for a second-hand laptop and a rickety desk. But what I lacked in capital, I more than made up for in determination and a deep understanding of the technological landscape. I'd spent years honing my coding skills, devouring every book and online course I could find, driven by a passion for creating elegant, efficient software solutions. My breakthrough idea came during one particularly frustrating freelance project. I realized that many small to medium-sized businesses were struggling with outdated, inefficient systems. There was a gap in the market for an affordable, user-friendly software that could integrate various aspects of their operations, from inventory management to customer relations. That's how the initial concept for NovaSuite, our flagship product, was born. My first client was a small online retailer teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. They'd been burned by expensive, clunky software in the past and were hesitant to invest again. I offered them a pilot program, a fraction of the cost of the big players, promising tangible results within 3 months. I poured every ounce of my energy into that project, working late into the night, tweaking code, and providing personalized support. 6 months later, their profits had soared, and their operations were running smoother than ever before. Word spread quietly through the local business community. A small, unassuming company, Novatech Solutions, was delivering real results. My name wasn't on any billboards or press releases. I deliberately kept a low profile, letting the success of my work speak for itself. I hired carefully, seeking out talented individuals who shared my vision and understood the importance of discretion. Every early employee signed a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. As Novatech grew, I maintained my humble facade, even keeping the tiny office above the laundromat long after we could afford something more prestigious. It was all part of the plan, a carefully constructed illusion that allowed me to operate in the shadows, building my empire while my family remained blissfully unaware. My decision to keep Novatech a secret from my family wasn't solely driven by a desire for dramatic revelation or petty revenge, though those certainly played a minor role. Strategically, it was a calculated move. The Hayes family's business empire, built on a foundation of traditional manufacturing and real estate, was notoriously cutthroat. They had a history of acquiring struggling companies at rock-bottom prices, often employing aggressive tactics that I found ethically questionable. Novatech, with its innovative technology and rapidly growing market share, would have been a prime target. Had they known of my involvement, I had no doubt they would have attempted to either acquire it for pennies on the dollar or somehow undermine its success. Operating in stealth mode allowed me to build a solid foundation, to establish a strong market presence without the interference of their predatory business practices. It was a form of protection, a way to nurture my creation in peace until it was strong enough to withstand any potential storm. Maintaining the facade of a struggling freelance graphic designer was surprisingly easy. My family, caught up in their own self-importance, rarely showed any genuine interest in my life. When asked about work, I would offer vague descriptions of designing logos or creating website mock-ups, carefully choosing mundane details that would quickly bore them into changing the subject. Their eyes would glaze over with disinterest, confirming my suspicion that they never truly saw me, only the underachieving relative they expected me to be. Building my team required a different kind of deception. I sought out individuals who were not only brilliant in their respective fields, but also possessed an unwavering sense of integrity and a commitment to discretion. The interview process was rigorous, focusing not just on technical skills, but also on character and the ability to keep sensitive information confidential. Every employee, from the software engineers to the administrative staff, signed an NDA that could rival the length and complexity of a small novel. They understood the importance of secrecy, the need to protect Novatech's innovative edge. As Novatech's success grew exponentially, we eventually outgrew the cramped office above the laundromat. We moved into a sleek, modern headquarters in the heart of the city's tech district. The contrast between my outward persona and my actual work life became almost comical. While my family imagined me hunched over a drawing tablet in a dimly lit room, I was leading board meetings in a state-of-the-art conference room, making decisions that impacted the livelihoods of hundreds of employees and the trajectory of the tech industry. To further maintain the illusion, I kept a small, unassuming office space in a less prestigious part of town. This was my freelance studio, the location I would vaguely reference when my family inquired about my whereabouts during the workday. It was sparsely decorated with just a basic computer setup and a few design books, enough to sell the story without raising any suspicion. There were a few near misses over the years, moments when the carefully constructed wall of secrecy threatened to crumble. I remember one particularly awkward encounter at Aunt Deborah's annual Christmas party. My cousin Michael, fueled by one too many glasses of champagne, cornered me with a conspiratorial grin. "So, Amelia," he slurred, "I heard through the grapevine that some new tech company is making waves. Nova, something?" My heart skipped a beat. Had he somehow stumbled upon the truth? I forced a casual laugh. "Nova sounds futuristic. I'm more of a traditionalist, with the whole design thing." He squinted at me, his eyes unfocused. Right, logos, very important." Thankfully, he was easily distracted by the arrival of the dessert platter, and disaster was averted. But those close calls served as constant reminders of the delicate balance I was maintaining and the potential consequences of exposure. The game of deception, while necessary, was a constant source of low-level stress, a weight I carried silently beneath the surface of my carefully constructed normalcy. Back in the present, Aunt Deborah's earlier remark about my supposed financial constraints still lingered in the air, a faint but persistent buzzing sound. "Another glass of this lovely Chardonnay, Amelia?" she offered, her tone dripping with a saccharine sweetness that always preceded a thinly veiled jab. "Though perhaps you should stick to the cheaper stuff. Freelancing can be so unpredictable, can it?" I accepted the offered wine with a practiced smile. "Thank you, Aunt Deborah. It's quite good." I paused, then casually inquired, "How was Uncle Richard's company doing these days?" Global innovations, wasn't it? Aunt Deborah's smile faltered ever so slightly. A subtle tension seemed to ripple through the small group we were standing with. "Oh, you know Richard," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "Always some minor hiccups, nothing he can't handle, of course." But the forced cheerfulness in her voice didn't quite mask the underlying worry in her eyes. Kevin, who had rejoined our little circle, scoffed. "Hiccups is an understatement. They've been bleeding money for the last year. Honestly, the way Dad runs that place, it's stuck in the Stone Age." He rolled his eyes dramatically. "He keeps talking about legacy and tradition while our competitors are light years ahead in terms of automation and efficiency." Michael chimed in, his usual confident demeanor slightly subdued. "We've tried to implement some new marketing strategies, but, well, the product line itself needs a major overhaul. It's like trying to sell horse-drawn carriages in the age of electric cars." I took another sip of my wine, carefully concealing my growing satisfaction. For months, I had been subtly monitoring global innovations decline. Their outdated technology and resistance to change had made them increasingly vulnerable. And while my family remained oblivious, Novatech had been quietly approached by several key players within global innovations, desperate for a lifeline. Have they considered bringing in some external consultants? I asked innocently. Sometimes a fresh perspective can make all the difference. Kevin snorted. Consultants? Dad would rather set the factory on fire. He thinks he knows best. Always has. Besides, he added with a dismissive wave, those big consulting firms just come in, charge a fortune, and tell you things you already know. Waste of money, if you ask me. The irony of his statement, considering the situation, was almost comical. Just then, my phone vibrated urgently in my hand. I glanced at the screen. It was a message from Chloe. Emergency. Hayes Manufacturing Board requesting urgent meeting tomorrow 9 a.m. regarding potential acquisition of Global Innovations. They are facing imminent bankruptcy. Your immediate input required. I scanned the message again, a sense of quiet anticipation building within me. They were finally at the point of desperation. Their pride, their arrogance, had led them to the brink, and now the only person who could potentially pull them back was the one they had consistently underestimated. Everything all right, Amelia? Aunt Deborah asked, noticing the change in my expression. I offered her my brightest, most insincere smile. Perfectly fine, Aunt Deborah. In fact, I'm afraid I must be going. I have a rather early start tomorrow. A very important meeting. Oh, still chasing those elusive design clients? She asked, her tone laced with her usual condescension. Something like that, I replied smoothly, already picturing the looks on their faces when they walked into Novatech's headquarters tomorrow morning. Something like that indeed. I made my excuses and slipped away, the weight of my carefully guarded secret feeling lighter than it had in years. The game was about to change, and I had a feeling the Hayes family was in for a very rude awakening. The next morning, the energy in Novatech's headquarters was palpable. Chloe, ever the unflappable professional, greeted me with her usual tablet and a knowing smile. They're already here, Amelia, the Hayes manufacturing delegation. Your uncle seems particularly agitated. I can imagine, I replied, a sense of calm anticipation washing over me. This was the moment I had been working towards for a decade. The years of quiet dedication, the countless late nights, the constant need to compartmentalize my two lives were all about to converge. I had instructed Chloe to usher them into the main conference room, the largest one with the panoramic view of the city skyline. It was designed to impress, all sleek lines, polished chrome, and state-of-the-art technology. I wanted them to feel the weight of Novatech's success before I even walked in the door. Did you prepare everything? I asked Chloe as we walked towards the conference room. Contracts are ready, financial projections are on the main screen, and I even made sure to have a fresh pot of their favorite blend of coffee brewing, she said, a hint of amusement in her voice, though I suspect they might not be in the mood for pleasantries. Perhaps not, I chuckled. Give me 2 minutes. I paused outside the heavy oak doors, taking a deep breath. This wasn't just about revealing my success. It was about reclaiming a decade of being underestimated, of being dismissed as nothing more than the family's artistic black sheep. Inside the conference room, I could hear the muffled sounds of their voices. Uncle Richard's booming tone was unmistakable, likely already trying to assert dominance in unfamiliar territory. Aunt Deborah's sharp, clipped tones followed, probably complaining about the lack of proper reception or the quality of the artwork on the walls. Kevin's more measured voice occasionally interjected, likely attempting to steer the conversation towards the impending financial disaster. I pushed open the doors. The conversation abruptly ceased. Uncle Richard sat at the head of the long, imposing table, exactly where he would position himself in his own boardroom. Kevin and Michael flanked him, both looking slightly out of their element in the modern, minimalist surroundings. Aunt Deborah sat slightly apart, examining her nails with an air of practiced boredom, clearly expecting this to be a quick and easy negotiation. Finally, Uncle Richard barked, his face already flushed. We've been waiting. Where is the CEO of this Novatech? Aunt Deborah's head snapped up, her eyes widening as she finally registered my presence. Amelia, what are you wearing, and why aren't you bringing coffee? I walked calmly to the head of the table, the seat directly opposite my uncle. I don't serve coffee anymore, Aunt Deborah. In fact, I never really did. What is the meaning of this? Uncle Richard demanded, his face turning a shade of red I'd only seen when his golf score was particularly abysmal. Where is the CEO? We were promised a meeting with the actual decision maker. You're looking at her, I said, my voice steady and even. I sat down, deliberately meeting each of their stunned gazes. I am Amelia Hayes, and I have been the CEO of Novatech Solutions since I founded the company 10 years ago. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Kevin's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Michael's pen clattered onto the polished table. Aunt Deborah's perfectly maintained composure finally fractured, her carefully applied lipstick seeming to quiver slightly. Uncle Richard recovered first, his face contorting in disbelief. This is absurd. You're just Amelia, the artist. No, Uncle Richard, I corrected him calmly. That was a cover, a very effective one, apparently, since none of you ever bothered to look past it. You were so convinced I was incapable of building anything of substance that you never noticed I already had. Just then, Chloe entered the conference room carrying a stack of bound documents. She efficiently distributed them around the table, placing a copy in front of each of my bewildered family members, before taking her place standing discreetly behind my chair. These documents, I continued, gesturing to the contracts in front of them, outline the terms under which Novatech Solutions will consider approving the merger between Hayes Manufacturing and Global Innovations. Consider approving? Kevin sputtered, his voice cracking. You can't be serious. This has to be some kind of joke, right? An elaborate prank? I picked up my tablet and projected Novatech's latest financial statements onto the large screen at the end of the room. The numbers, stark and undeniable, filled the screen. Novatech Solutions currently manages over $1 billion in client assets. We have a 98% client satisfaction rate, and our software is used by over half of the Fortune 500 companies in this sector. Our approval is not just required for any major changes to Global Innovation's business structure. It is the only thing that can save it. I offered my stunned relatives a small, tight smile. Does that look like a joke to you? This is impossible, Aunt Deborah whispered, her face pale. You've always just been Amelia. That's precisely what you were meant to think, I replied, my gaze unwavering. I turned to Mr. Davies, a longtime board member of Global Innovations who had been instrumental in reaching out to Novatech. Mr. Davies, would you mind explaining to my family why Global Innovations chose to partner with Novatech over other potential investors? Mr. Davies, a man with a calm and authoritative presence, straightened in his chair. Novatech's reputation precedes them. When Hayes Manufacturing initiated their hostile takeover attempts several months ago, we were in a desperate situation. Novatech stepped in, offering not just a financial solution, but a comprehensive restructuring plan that has already begun to yield significant results. We've seen a 25% increase in efficiency since implementing their initial strategies. Restructuring plan, Uncle Richard sputtered, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. That was you? You've been deliberately undermining our acquisition attempts? Among others, I said, ticking off examples on my fingers. Remember the Peterson Electronics deal that fell through last quarter? Or the Henderson Industries contract you were so sure you had locked down? And what about Sterling Innovations, which suddenly secured a major investment just as you were about to make your final offer? I leaned forward, meeting my uncle's enraged gaze. For the past few years, Uncle Richard, I've been quietly ensuring that Hayes Manufacturing's predatory practices don't always go unchallenged. Uncle Richard's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. You deliberately sabotaged your own family's business? No, I corrected him, my voice firm. I built my own business, one that focuses on innovation and sustainable growth, not on acquiring struggling companies for spare parts. The fact that my success has occasionally interfered with your plans is merely an unintended consequence. This is outrageous, Kevin exclaimed, finally finding his voice. I'm calling our lawyers. He reached for his phone, his hand trembling. Sit down, Kevin, I said, my voice carrying a new level of authority that made him freeze. You really should read those contracts in front of you, the ones your firm spent weeks trying to finalize for this meeting. I watched as realization dawned on his face. That's right, Hayes Manufacturing's biggest legal retainer this year? That's also me. Chloe stepped forward, placing another document on the table. This is a summary of Novatech's current market capitalization and liquid assets. You'll note that we are now in a position to acquire a controlling interest in Hayes Manufacturing, should we choose to do so. The room erupted in a cacophony of disbelief and outrage. Aunt Deborah gasped, clutching her chest. Michael frantically started tapping on his phone, presumably checking Novatech's stock price. Kevin sank back into his chair, looking utterly shell-shocked. "This is blackmail," Uncle Richard ordered, slamming in his fist on the table. "No, Uncle Richard," I said calmly, standing up. "This is business, the kind you always told me I would never be capable of handling." I smoothed the lapels of my jacket. "You have until 5 o'clock today to review the merger terms. They are, I believe, quite generous, considering our current position. If you decline, Novatech Solutions will begin purchasing Hayes Manufacturing stock on the open market tomorrow morning." I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and Aunt Deborah," I added sweetly, "that Chardonnay you so graciously offered me yesterday, I happen to own the vineyard that produces it, bought it last year. And the coffee you were so insistent on this morning? That's from my own chain of artisanal coffee shops. Turns out my unpredictable freelance career has been quite lucrative after all." With that, I exited the conference room, leaving the stunned silence of my family hanging in the air.